to go.
Oh, Joe and Vicky.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a discussion today of web accessibility, particularly as it pertains to content management on the web. So my name is Joe DeLuca with the College of Science, and with me is Binky Lush, and I'll let Binky introduce herself first.
Okay, as Joe said, my name is Binky Lush, and I'm the manager of Discovery Access and Web Services at the University Libraries. We have maybe a unique setup. We have a single content management system for our single website for the libraries, and we have about 200, give or take, content authors within the libraries, and then we have a web team of 5 that runs the site. So that just gives a little bit of background of where we're coming from and what our accessibility focus is. We have, right now we're down to about 5,000 pages, and hi Vicki, and no problem, and we have several, the way our area is set up, we have a number of, as I said, our 200 authors, and then we have web reps that are responsible for certain pages within areas within the site. And now, since January, I'm lucky enough to have someone else in my office who is focusing on content accessibility, Vicki Brightbill, who's working with me as well. So that's a little bit of the background from the library.
Excellent. So that's good because we represent 2 very different approaches to managing content, not necessarily of our own choice. I like what they're doing. They have kind of a central focus on all this, whereas me, I come from a very distributed environment. In the College of Science, basically, I maintain the websites for most of the departments. You know, math, chem, BMB, and statistics, and all those. And each of those are kind of under their own direction and their own person. They each have their own content managers, and they don't usually talk to the folks in the other departments, and I can't really mandate that they do anything. And that's okay. So basically what I try to do is the best I can to educate them as to how they can keep the content accessible. Most of the content managers I work with are great, and they really want to learn a lot. I've offered this training. The training that we're going to go through today, with only slight modifications, I've offered to the content managers in the College of Science, and it's very well received. Everybody really wants to learn. The problem is, of course, a lot of us just don't have time for everything that we're tasked with. So much less centralization for me, and it's just more of a case of providing information as people, as people come, and they do turn over with some regularity too. So I have to keep offering this training and keep trying to answer questions and make myself as accessible to them as possible. So that's what we have in the College of Science. You heard a little bit about the libraries. Moving on. So why we're doing this? Well, I think it's obvious. First of all, it's the right thing to do, right? We want our content to be accessible to everybody. Then we will say there is that agreement we have with the NFB that we want to be compliant with. So there's that. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about how we test for accessibility, because as a content provider, so again, I should back up. I'm presenting this largely as if you are a web manager and you need to distribute this information down to the people who actually put the content on the site. But so it's kind of but nevertheless, if you are actually a content manager yourself, and if you're like me, you'll probably fill both of those roles, then there's just general information there that I hope will help as well. So I will show how you can test for accessibility. If you're not the web manager, how do you test for accessibility? And the big one, I think, is avoiding remediation, because remediation, having to fix problems, is a losing battle. They just keep coming. It's like the mail. It just keeps coming. And the way I've broken it down to the content providers in our college is the big 5. The big 5 ways that they can create accessibility issues on their website. And then I will talk a little bit about tools and support that we get. So there's some of the official verbiage. You can see this on accessibility.psu.edu. So no later than October 15th, all pages have to be accessible, with some caveats in there. But nevertheless, it's a tall task, and we have many, many pages on the dozen or so sites that I support. So we're doing our best to get there, and we've made great strides since we started down this, but we still have a ways to go. I'll be the first to admit that. So the disabilities, remember, the agreement with the NFB is primarily focused on blind users or people with vision impairment, right? And that's kind of the highest bar I think we have, because getting your site to work with screen readers is very important. And that will resolve a lot of other issues. But, of course, there is hearing impairment, which is why captioning becomes important. There are cognitive disabilities. You get it, fine motor. We're talking about beyond the blockers now. I know Christian was talking about yesterday at the Web Liaisons meeting. So looking at some of these other things, like having adequate contrast on your site, is also very important. We'll focus mostly on screen reader stuff and assistive technologies. So I think how to get started, I think he's going to step in here.
Yeah, so we have had I don't know if it was an advantage or disadvantage of having to have our content made accessible last year. So we were a little bit ahead of the game, which made it a bit of a scramble for us, but it also feels kind of nice to say we met the deadline, and we are just really trying to maintain that level of accessibility. But in looking back, the thing that helped us the most was being able to start with a plan and really taking an overview or an inventory of where you are and what it is that you need to make accessible. So we actually started really defining what making our site accessible meant. We listed, what the pages were, what the sections, they were divided up into, what assets were associated with those pages, and then we really drilled down to see who exactly was responsible for what page. And we did that for all 5,000 pages. And so we knew exactly who to go to for what and who needed to do the work to make these things accessible. Now, of course, some pages are a lot more important than others. We have some pages that nobody visits at all. So we looked at analytics, and we used those to figure out which sections we wanted to attack first, which were most important, as well as which assets were most important. We have a number of tutorials that are accessed all the time, and we really focused on making those accessible. So there are multiple ways you can do it. The way we ended up doing it was with shared Google spreadsheets, and then we color-coded them, and we had a whole system down, and everybody was in there all the time indicating, which pages had been fixed and which assets had been fixed. So that was sort of our first effort, but starting with a plan was hugely helpful, because then you can mark your progress, you can see where you are, you know how much you have left to do. So
yes, a much more systematic approach than we went through in science, which is basically we have a lot of broken stuff and we got to fix it. And so, right, so have a plan. Sounds like a good one. Our plan was basically fix everything now. We're still working on that.
Well,
not so much.
We did run around a little bit like the Three Stooges, I think, for about a week, saying, how are we going to get this done? And having a plan was as much, just to lower the stress level for all of us and know what the task was in front of us.
So when I'm talking to content providers, then it's really a big mystery to them if they're new to this accessibility. How do you test? So how do you test? So I usually started the training that I've done with content providers by talking a little bit about how to test. So I'll jump out here and say that there are a few things we can do. So here's just a page that I'll pull up, and first of all, we can test with automated tools, right? So Wave, Firefox, as you might know, has the capability of having all these extensions plugged into them, which is why I usually end up with about a dozen toolbars up here. I have to hide a bunch of them all the time, but right now I have this Wave toolbar installed, and that enables me to, it's just a Firefox extension. Wave is offered by WebAIM, and I can just real quickly run an error check on that, and it will tell me if there are any errors. So right now, it has detected no errors on this page, but you still need to check it more carefully than this tool is basically what this yellow bar is telling us up here. So if there were missing alt attributes on this image, it would show here. If there were other issues like that, those would show. But it's kind of a quick and dirty check, to be real honest. So, but nevertheless, it's worthwhile. They also have, at webaim.org, that's the site I'm on right there. It's a very helpful resource. So you can jump out there and look at some of the stuff they have. Really nice. But they also have an online tool. So you could put the URL of your page in there and have it run against your page and tell you what kind of errors. So if you can't install the plugin, maybe some of you don't have admin rights on your computer and that plugin won't install for some reason, you can go right to this web page, put the URL in there, and go. Obviously, the page has to be published if you're using a content management system. If it's in private state, it's not going to be able to get to there. And then you might notice down here at the bottom of this page, there's a Firefox toolbar, and that's where you can get that extension. You can download the extension for Wave. So, automated tools. There's another one called FAE, the Functional Accessibility Evaluator. I can't remember what it's called. What it stands for. Is that right? Okay. So, under here, so it'll give you a whole bunch of reports, and the one I like is, for example, the headings. It will show me the headings on my page. Where they, how they look. I have 1, 2s, and 3s, and 2s, and I don't know where this comes up forever in these clone sites, and I don't know where it's finding that. Never resolved that issue. But the sheriff doesn't find that. So there's another way to use a tool to automatically test it. I also show the content providers that we do run scans on the sites. And then with the sheriff, as we call it, the high software compliance sheriff, which is basically a tool that's hosted here on campus at University Park, and most of you have access to this, and or your web manager will have access to this. You can run this against the site, and it'll crawl the site and hit 250 pages or more, or however many you want, and it'll give you a better report. As Christian will tell us, this health score doesn't mean anything. Ignore that.
Yes, but look at all those green
But then you look down here. He's saying, look at all these green boxes, green is good.
We
right?
still like to see green.
Except we go down here. Yeah, it's funny. People, no matter, if Christian can tell us that doesn't mean anything, all he wants, and we still keep trying to make it green.
Yeah.
But I will say, while it's maybe an inaccurate metric at times, there is some correlation between getting a good score there and when we resolve issues, we do see it go up a little bit.
Yeah.
So, that said, you can drill down in these reports, and eventually, and I show the content providers that we can get this massive report that shows every page, and this scrolls on forever. That's the one that had 15%. Right? These are all the pages that have some sort of issue on it, and they look at that and they go, "Oh my!" Yeah. So, and as do we. Now, fortunately, if you're sometimes you'll get a big list like that, and if you're using a content management system, it might be a templating issue. That you can fix something in a template, and that'll make a whole heap of errors go away. That, of course, is outside of the realm of the content providers, right? That's usually on the web manager or the person who's managing the website to do that.
Joe, do you provide those reports to your content managers at all?
We have not, because of the challenges faced in interpreting them. Also, the report, when you access the report, you can click on the link and go right to the problem, but with the PDF, you don't necessarily have that same capability. The PDF would be something that we could print out or send to the content providers. So they're definitely inefficient. We've basically taken on fixing it ourselves, and we hired someone as a part-timer to really get us going on this. But you have sent that out. Do you want to speak to that?
We are not doing it currently, but after our initial push for remediation, we were sending it out to web reps, and then they were able to take a look and see what they needed to do in their area of pages and contact the page authors and let them know what needed to be remediated. So we used it that way, but it's hard to interpret. And people need training to understand what it is they're looking at.
Yeah, and that's a big issue. At this stage, a lot of the content providers wouldn't know what to do with it anyway. What's that error telling us? That's where, of course, we can help with that, but nevertheless, that's really a challenge. So we have several automated tools that we can run against the site. This will give us some ideas. So we're talking right about how do we test for accessibility. And for our content providers to know that, I think, is really important, that they could actually do a plug-in and take a look real quickly, or they could submit a URL to this website and get a feel for, did I create any accessibility problems? Great. That's a real step in the right direction. I'm trying to empower them to take this upon themselves a little bit more to do that, and some of them certainly have done that. Of course, ultimately, the test is to run a screen reader against it. And I think the most effective thing I've done in training the content providers is to just show them what a screen reader does. I'm not very good at using a screen reader, but I can show them VoiceOver on the back quickly enough that, like, lights just go off in their heads. You can see them going, oh, I had no idea how this thing worked. What you were talking about with the screen reader, I don't know. Did you put something over top of the screen? And I didn't know. So I will pull that up, and when I do this, very quickly they start to understand. So if I pulled up
VoiceOver on Safari, World Campus Programs, Penn State Everly College of Science Department of Statistics window, World Campus Programs, Penn State.
Okay, just a second. So I pulled it up and I go, okay, it's talking, and I basically show them that point out that when you view a web page, do you read it word for word? Of course not, right? It's just too much. You try to scan that page very quickly to glean whatever information you want to try to understand what's on that page and if it's relevant to you, if you want to keep pursuing this. Well, we don't want our screen reader users to have to read every word on the page. We want to give them some navigational tools. And fortunately, screen readers like VoiceOver, like JAWS, they all have tools to enable users to scan the page. One way to scan a page would be looking at the headings. So, for example, by pulling up what they call a web rotor on VoiceOver, you can look at all the headings real quickly.
Form controls, 4 items.
If there are
Web
forms,
spots, 0 items. Links, 57 items.
there are all the links on the page, 57 items. Web spots, you can set those. The question is, what was web spots? And I'm not real sure. I think you can set up certain spots for the screen reader to hit. And there's some way to encode that, but I'm not sure. Do you know?
I haven't mastered them.
I haven't. Okay. So I'm not real sure on web spots.
57 items.
I think that's a VoiceOver specific
I
thing.
think you can just sort of divide the page up into areas, and so you could make widgets.
Right.
Web spot.
Right.
Headings, 6 items.
Okay. So links.
Web links, 57 items.
So
Headings, 6 items.
I don't know why the links isn't going away. That's just a display thing. But so there we go. We can see the headings right away. And also
Web spot links, 57
look at the links. Now the key right now, I say, now do you get why click here is not good link text? Because click here might work for you if you're sighted and you can read the sentence right in front of it and you have some context. But if you're just reading a list of links, click here doesn't mean anything to you, right? It's just click here for what? Right? So that's when I can really see that I understand now the screen here. So of course I can just
Headings, 6 items.
use this for navigation. If I say
Master of Heading Level 3, Master of Applied Statistics, clickable.
I don't know why
Copyright link.
I don't know why that link.
Heading
Sorry.
1, World Campus Programs.
So then I can just, of
Heading
course,
Level 3, Master of Applied Statistics. Heading Level 3, Graduate
so I
Certificate
can
in
just
Applied Statistics.
navigate. So there are various ways. I'll turn VoiceOver off. So there are various
Close
ways.
button.
I thought I said be quiet. Sorry.
VoiceOver off.
There you go. So that just quickly shows users that, oh, okay, so the content is going to be read to them somehow, and by creating good link text and creating good headings, it gives users a way to navigate through the page without having to read word by word by word. Okay, so that I think is one of the most. If you don't know how to use a screener, just play with it a little bit. I'm bad at it, but learning how to use that will help you as the web manager, and it'll help you explain this to other folks. And when people see that, man, they're ready to go.
And you can still download a demo version of JAWS, can't you?
It lasts 40 minutes.
Right, for 40 minutes, yeah. So that's a good option if you don't have the budget to buy JAWS, which is expensive.
According, the terms of use have been updated. You cannot legally use it over and over again for 40-minute periods for testing purposes.
Okay.
But there is if you are a web developer or a web liaison and you need access to JAWS for testing purposes, if you send a note to accessibilityweb@psu.edu, we may be able to give you access to some shared licenses.
We can give you access to shared JAWS. It supports 20 concurrent users. I don't think we have 20 concurrent users at any time.
Okay.
And actually, since while we're on a break, Carolyn put up a comment about using WAVE. So she was concerned about the WAVE test, sort of like the client sheriff testing, invoking concepts such as H1 and other HTML-based concepts. Do you have any thoughts on how that works with your content managers who may not know any HTML at all?
Meaning that it'll throw those errors up and they won't know how to interpret them? Am I getting
Right.
the gist of it? Well, yeah, that's a good point, Carolyn. I think what I do now is I've shown them that basic thing is that's one of my big five. Okay, it's one of the big 5 ways they can get us in trouble, and so I show them. I try to right now in this training give them some education on what those H1s and H5s mean. The other thing, I of course make myself readily available. If they have any questions that they don't understand, they can certainly email me, call me, whatever. So, being accessible to them is one way that I really help that. But I'm going to hit that a little bit in this training, so I hope that helps. So that's how we would test, right? We would run some tools against it, and then we would also maybe try a screen reader on it, and we'd have an idea. So, how to remediate. The basics of that is if you can use a CMS on your site, great, because as I mentioned before, you can fix problems in the template that's outside, and then basically tell the content providers some of the errors you get may well be on me to fix. I might have to get into that template and fix something for you. So I think most people are using a CMS now. So then that leads to content issues, and that's basically, I say, the WYSIWYG editor, right? The what you see is what you get editor inside the screen. Wherever you can put text in, that's where you can create or avoid accessibility issues. And that's what we want to do, right? Because we want to avoid the need to remediate. Remediation is a losing battle if you just have to keep fixing things. So the goal of my trainings with them is to say, we have lots of problems. Let's just not make more. Let's stop the bleeding now. Right? Put a finger in the dike because it's bleeding, and and to some extent. So how to avoid remediation? The delete key is my favorite, and it applies to pages as well, and old, outdated, non-relevant content. So stuff that's not relevant anymore, if you could remove it, then you don't have to remediate it. Now, there are some, As Binky pointed out to me yesterday, the 80-35, and she's going to talk a little bit about that, I think, as we go. There may be some rules and policies in your area as to how long you keep stuff and what it is and all that. But I would bet that I know that in every site I've been on that I maintain, there's stuff that could be deleted. I don't really have that authority, but nevertheless, it's yeah. So if you can delete stuff, that's a good idea. There are like over 1 trillion web pages out there. Okay, we don't need more. So I pulled this from WebAIM a little while ago to show content providers what some of the biggest issues are. CAPTCHA, well, they can't do anything about that. Flash, we're not dealing with. So most of these things I would have to deal with as the web manager. But inside here, you will see ambiguous links. That's a big one that they control, right? The click here's of the world, right? Missing or improper alt text. That's one that you could hurt me with. Missing or improper headings, right? Too many links. I'm guilty of that one sometimes. And tables. This is complex data tables, but I would put forth that most of the WYSIWYGs can create problems in tables because there's just incomplete markup. So, are you getting the idea what the big ones are here? Yeah, there they are. Alt text, headings, links, and tables. Hey, I said 5. Oh yeah, there's that. PDFs create lots of problems for us, so that's what I'd like to do. I get happy. No more PDFs.
Do that again.
Christian likes that one.
I'm doing this for Christian's benefit.
Watch.
If only it were that easy. I just always, when I use Keynote, just have to try to find a way to work in the flames. I don't know. But that was an appropriate use there. So PDFs are just a big, big problem certainly for us in the College of Science. But we'll get to that. So let's talk about these ones in here. Okay, alt text, headings, links, and tables. So basically, alt text, right? And I can show them the HTML here a little bit. Most of them don't want to look at the HTML, and that's fine. I don't blame them. It's okay. But you do have some overachievers in the crowd usually, who, I want to do the HTML. Okay, well, this is basically what happens, right? It puts an alt text in there, and this might be an image, and what happens is when the screen reader gets to that, it would just read that alt text. So good alt text, the rule of thumb I use is to just use it, write it as if you were describing the image to someone over the phone, right? So what does it look like? The big thing that the sheriff would always complain about if you put image of or picture of College of Outreach Science staff. And the reason it doesn't like that, and the spec actually does say that you should not use those words. And the reason is that when the screen reader gets there, it will already say image. Say image, College of Science Outreach staff. I could probably do a little better job than there, 12 members or something of the College of I can't remember what the picture was, but you get the idea. So now, this is one thing that we often get hung up on is, depending on the CMS you use, the WYSIWYG you use, the way you take care of and manage these alt attributes is going to vary. So I can only show you an example here, but you'll have to work, with your content providers to make sure that they know how they can control that alt text. For example, in the system we use, when you upload an image, you can upload the image right into some location on the site, and you can give it a description, which will be the alt text. But when you go to drop that image into a page, you could actually override that. Sometimes the description that you originally put on there would be just right. But depending on the context of the image, it might be, the alt text would be better if it's something else. So in this case, you can see that there's the image I'm going to use. So you had a mouse here somewhere. Okay, well there's the image, and there's the image description, which is going to be the text for it. So this is just one example. This is TinyMCE is the editor. You might use CK editor or whatever, but there's going to be a way to make sure that you give it an image description. So that's first and foremost. That's something that the Wave toolbar tool would catch. That would certainly catch those for you if they're missing. It can't tell you if it's good alt text or not, right? If your system just puts in oldmain.jpg for the alt text, it's going to say, yeah, there's alt text there, but that's not necessarily good. And that would actually fail on the sheriff. The sheriff would catch that one. So, write good alt text. That's a big one. Of course, captioning, right? Again, this is, remember, non-text content. So, if a person has a hearing disability, or they're in a loud bar, reading, surfing your site, you could, they could watch the video and read the text. So again, providing text for non-text content. Okay. Any questions or comments about anything here? Oh, I noticed that Elizabeth did post that NVDA is free for Windows, which is another screen reader, so another tool for testing. Mm-hmm. So that's alt text. That's fairly straightforward. I think most people get that. The next one is headings. And basically the idea that I started explaining this to someone once, and they said, oh, so it's just like you're doing an outline. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much right. So with the templating system that we use, so let me back up. If you don't know this, headings are H1s, H2, H3, H4. It allows you to provide structure to the document, to show you what's important, what might be a subheading, a subtopic of one of those headings, and so forth. So it gives you a way to provide structure. In our site, H1 and H2 are already spoken for. I embed those into templates for the footer, for the navigation, for the main content well. So they basically have H3s and H4s to work with. And notice I have them highlighted here. So when they would highlight the text in the WYSIWYG, they could choose heading or subheading. And basically, if they use those, I'm safe. The only way they can get me in trouble is if they use subheading before they've used a heading, because they would be out of order. So to make it as easy as possible on them, and just because it works, is use heading. If you're unsure, use heading. When would you use subheading? Well, if it's actually a subtext. I can actually show you one of those. Let me jump out here. Take a look at this page here. So if we looked at our headings, this is an H1 tag right there. I'll show you the headings again. Okay. The main content heading is right in here. You can't see it, it's embedded, but what I have is the main content, the footer, and the navigation in this section is the same in every site we have. So it's consistent for them. It's there in all the different departmental sites. These headings in here are going to vary depending on the content, of course, right? So this is an H2, this is an H3 here. The next one, what are requirements, is an H3. Now look right here. See this elective courses? That is actually, if I inspected that, is what? It's bold text. And that's a case where I would use a subheading, right? Because what are the requirements? Elective courses fall under the requirements. So when you're, in this case, the creator of this content just did heading, or did not make a heading. She went in and just did bold space. So in this case, I would recommend that could be a subheading. And this is actually correct use in my estimation of bold. This would probably be back to a heading again. Like so. And that's a heading.
One of the things we do in the libraries, because we're the libraries, is talk about it in terms of a book. So you have your title of the book and maybe your subtitle, which would be your H1s and H2s, and then the chapters would be H3, and then the subsections would be subsequent headings. And it's a contextual example that works. And we do the same thing. H1s and H2s are just built in, and then our authors have H3s through H5s, I believe, that they can work with. Yep. Mm-hmm. And usually, in a lot of cases, people are using certain ones for appearance. That's what they tend to go with. So they really do need to understand that it's important for the structure.
That's a really good point. Is people, the content providers will want it to look the way they want it to look, and if they think the heading's too small, they'll try to choose the bigger one. And they're thinking that it's about appearance or it's about display as opposed to building structure. And so I try to impress upon them that if you're choosing how you're going to format that text based on how it looks, you're doing it wrong, right? You need to be choosing it based on the order and the structure of the document. And most of them seem to understand that concept. They didn't have okay, I get that. So, so that's a little bit about headings. I think those are very important. And screen reader users that we've talked to, they always express how important having headings are, because just they're important to us as sighted users to be able to quickly scan the page and see what's there. So let's talk about link text a little bit. Yeah, that's a big problem. So read more here in this case. Read more in this case. The sheriff was really upset about this because because A, they're not very descriptive links, and B, there's this links with the same text that go to different places, right? And so this, in other words, this read more goes somewhere, and the other read more goes somewhere else. So that's a problem. You get that. It's easily fixed. That's the thing that I can express upon them, or make them understand that it's easy to fix this. How would we very easily fix that? It's just read more about Peter Hudson's lecture, right? So now if you're looking at these links in a collection of links, in that, like in the rotor, it makes sense. Read more about Peter Hudson's lecture. Bang, I'm there. Then some astute person said, what about that map link there? On both of them in the last class I did. I'm like, yeah, I know, I thought about that too. They actually do go to the same place, and they're both linked to 100 Thomas building. So, I mean, I think better link text might be in order there. Map to 100 Thomas building would probably be better link text there. So remember that the link text, so it has to describe the destination, where you're going, where the user would be going if he or she clicked that. So if you remember the list of items on those big problems from WebAIM, ambiguous links was really high on that list. And that's something that all content providers do, is they all put links on there, and they all make link text. Here's another one that, as an example I gave them. I'm sorry, these are old examples, but they just ring true, and I could find more of them that are newer, but they still work. So in this case, I put this up, and I say, okay, where does that link go? And if you were looking at it, where do you think it would go? To the person, to the professor's webpage, right? It doesn't. It went to the departmental website. It went to math. So it's easily fixed because there's the link text. Right? If you wanted to link to the math website, link to mathematics at Penn State. If you wanted to link to her profile, you would choose, probably her name as the link text. So again, a lot of times if you just think it through, they're things that are easy to fix. More of the same, right? I mean, links, I see these everywhere on the sites, and I fix them all the time when I see them, when I jump in there. But again, recommended plan, out of context, we have recommended plan, link, check sheet, recommended plan, check sheet for what, right? Again, it's easily fixed. Link forms, man, with Google, I'm not a fan of these at all. I don't know that I'd ever go to somebody's site looking for some other site. That's Google. That's what I go to Google for. If I wanted to know about Society of Actuaries, I would type that into Google and get there really fast. So providing these, I think, is of dubious value, in my humble opinion. But if you're going to do it, at least do it right. By making the links are already there. See, information from the MAA, that should be the link text. And the link should be underneath it. What's the screen reader going to do with this? I'm going to try to show this. I'm not sure how this will come through.
Hopefully it will come through.
But let's see.
So just as a little preface, this is a video that we did, some of our training on, some of our accessibility training for our content management system. We asked Michelle McManus to demo some bad examples of links. And we had her do multiples of these, but this in particular is some examples of bad links. And
That's a beautiful link.
yeah, isn't it
Look at that
lovely?
baby.
And that was a real one too. So.
That was real. See, so let's see.
Organization committed to advancing the role of design and expanding opportunity and enhancing experience for people of all ages and abilities. With more info, the United States Access Board.
Okay, we're right here.
Is an independent federal agency devoted to accessibility for people with disabilities. Click here. To report a problem with the database: click https://secure.library.edu/question/we-answer CFM question equals 3% 22% 20.
You get the point, huh? It's reading all that text almost letter by letter, word by word, if it can, right? So, yeah. So we have to, so in that example that I gave you here, let's go back one. So that would be read, each one of those would be read, http://mathclassifieds.org. So all we'd have to do in this case is just make, the description text below it the link. I mean, I don't know if some people think that they want to be able to copy the link and paste it somewhere. I don't know, but I think most users know that you can sort of right-click and copy link location and such. Not everybody, I realize that, but go ahead, sure.
So maybe this more so with email addresses as opposed to website links, but when you have like somebody's name and it's hyperlinked, that goes directly to their email, but I actually want to see what their email address is, not click on it. How?
I think you could do the same thing, that you could right-click on it or control-click and say, I think you can copy link location on an email address, and then you could just, so you'd have to copy it and then you'd have to paste it into something like a, and, right, so the question was, how about mail to links if you want to get the actual email address? That's probably the best way to do it. I think what I would do is just click on it, and it would kick my email program up, and I'd just copy it up.
This is the problem with, especially with Mac users, me being a Mac user too, and some of us at the university have already switched over to the UCS.
Yes.
Every time I click on an email link, it brings up whatever stupid email software is on my Mac that we don't use, whereas you need to actually copy the link and paste it into UCS.
Gotcha. So I guess the way I've done that is I've just configured my mail client on Mac to work with UCS.
Oh.
So, but I feel your pain. I don't know if you can, do you use the web client for?
Yeah, we use the web client.
I don't know if there's a workaround for that. It's a good question, though. So having to actually copy the link, I think you can right-click on it and copy link location.
Which is
what
what
to try.
I do.
Oh, you do?
But
Okay. You're looking for a more elegant solution?
yeah.
I understand.
I would have to second Joe's comment. I have my UCS synced to Apple Mail, and it's a lot faster.
Yeah, I kind of use both of them. I don't know. Sometimes if I'm on the web, I'll do that. I like the calendar on the web. I hate to deal with calendar. So there we go. So links. Again, that's a big win for users to figure out if I can get users to understand how links work, because they put so many of them on the site. So tables, and they can be a big problem. Now with the WYSIWYG that we use, you can choose insert a table, and you can choose to use a caption. You can enter caption, and you can enter summary, and you get almost all the way there with the table that's marked up correctly. But it will not give us the scope attribute on the heading. So basically, in that TH tag that you see there, if you're not an HTML person, there would be something that says TH, of course, for table header. The attribute would be scope equals col for column, or scope equals row for row, meaning that it's a header for the column or it's a header for the row.
So your authors have to go in and actually add that, so they can edit the source code?
They can, but they usually don't. Okay. And I don't have a good solution for it. My best solution is that to only use tables when you need them, first, and B, if you use one and you're not sure, to send it to me and I will QA it for you and just check, make sure it's all okay. So, and the first point is not one to be taken lightly. Only use tables when you need them. There's kind of extremes, right? Before we used to do For those old timers in the bunch, we used to do layout in tables all the time. That's how we did the web, right? But then once CSS matured and we got some standards going, we've really gone away from that. So now tables are evil, and we never use tables ever. Well, there are times when we should use tables, and that's when you're dealing with tabular data, right? They're perfectly good cases for using tables. So. And by marking them up correctly, that's going to make a big difference. I would point you to, and point your content providers to the page that Elizabeth put together on accessibility.psu.edu on tables. It's really good. It really explains, it even reads it out how the screen reader would read it. So that's really handy to get them. So this is basically, they can go, when they insert a table, they can basically do this. They can put the summary right in there. They can get a caption, and by checking the caption, it'll give them a little space to put the caption in. It'll mark it up all correctly. It just won't give us the scopes attribute, the scope attribute, and that would that really affects how the screen reader handles reading these. Okay, yeah. And here's a case. Here's a table. Is that a good use of table? Absolutely not. That's doing table for layout. She wanted 3 columns, so she wanted to do a table. You want it. It's not really tabular data. Okay, but I needed to look across that way and say, well, what if someone squishes this down? Or what if they do it on the phone, right? Your table's going to be lost anyway. So she didn't want to stack them top to bottom, but content. So let me just jump out here and show you one that you'll probably love. Is it here? No. Is it there? No? Sorry.
That's a real table.
That was a real
That was
table.
a good
This
table.
is a real table. Okay. It's pretty cool. It's a table. It looks great. But if I inspect this element, anybody read that?
It's an image.
It's an image. Correct. It's a great table if you're sighted. But so what's going to happen? Can you see the alt text there? The alt text is typical course rollout schedule for tentative planning. So the sighted reader would have all this wonderful information as to when I can take Stat 414. But to the screen reader user, you would get that, hey, here's a picture of a tentative rollout. Yeah. Okay, so that's what not to do. Okay? But you get the idea. So there was a table on there. Headings. Yeah, so these THs would have to have a scope of column. I'm sorry. Yep. So, yeah, I know it sounds lame, but unfortunately that is the best solution I have for them. If you're going to use these, and there are use cases for them, do your best. If you want to learn how to mark it up correctly, by all means, I'd be happy to tell you. But we have that. So PDFs, that brings us to the fourth one. So we hit, alt text, headings, link text, and tables. Those are the big issues that I end up fixing when we do remediation. PDFs, so all those green scores you saw, looks really good because they don't scan PDFs. And if they did, we would be in big trouble because...
Well, Compliance Sheriff doesn't help you to understand the PDFs.
Right.
It's absolutely useless. So you might as well uncheck the PDF and Microsoft Word boxes when you're setting up your scans.
Right. And that's what we've done. So it doesn't scan them. So the basic strategy, so how do we deal with PDFs moving forward? Well, if you have some old ones, then you can delete them. And this is what I ask content providers to do, is if you can delete them, great. If you can make them accessible, okay, that's good too. And if you can convert them to HTML, that's great. Now, some of them could easily be converted to HTML. Basically, people have used them because it's easy to do, right? You go there, you go to Word, you say create PDF, bang, upload, done, coffee break, right? Donezo, as we say. But mostly converting them to HTML wouldn't be terribly difficult. And some of them are very complex. I will grant them that, and it'd be very difficult. They have tables, they have all kind of crazy things. Syllabi are one of the big ones that people want to use PDFs for forever. But basically, what I've shown them is that I created this PDF and just showed them that there's no, in this PDF, it's just like one that may have been printed from, by going to print the PDF, and notice there are no navigation points here on the left-hand side, right? It's just one big document, so the only way anybody can access any of this content, we have great headings and everything in there, what? But you can't access them because the PDF wasn't tagged when it was created. Obviously, creating accessible PDFs is a deep subject way beyond this. I'm just trying to demonstrate to them that if you created the PDF correctly, you would have all these navigation points on the left-hand side, right, with all the headings and such, so that the person could quickly navigate. Just like you saw headings working in the web page, it would work the same way on a PDF. Okay? So, it's a difference between creating a tagged and an untagged PDF. Again, outside the scope of this, but there's a training coming up, which I actually took just a couple weeks ago. I think it's in mid-April, like the 21st or so, if I want to say. 21st is, no, that's a Sunday. So, later this month, on creating accessible Word and PowerPoint documents. So, if you create documents in those two, most of us do, right? That'd be a good training to take. So check it out. It's going to be offered soon. The other thing I did with this one, now see, this is a fairly straightforward PDF. And when I did the training, I basically did a copy and paste. Well, I copied this, pasted it to Notepad, text edit actually in Mac, and then copied it again, pasted it into a page in the CMS, and basically was there. I just had to add the headings and format it up, and they sat there and watched me. In 5 minutes, I had the document converted from PDF to HTML. Again, I grant that it's an easy document, but, because it's already has headers and everything in it. But the point is, a lot of the PDFs we see are pretty simple documents too, that people just they just printed and then just uploaded to the site. So the strategies these are the strategies that I hope for, is deleting, making them accessible, or converting to HTML. We don't really have any automated way to do that at this point.
No, we do the 3 R's: remove, remediate, or redo, is what we say. So,
Nice.
But it works. But now what you see on this slide is hopefully maybe some justification for getting rid of some of the PDFs that you see. There is a policy 8035, which has to do with retention of university documents, and as the library has the university archives, and there are pretty strict guidelines about what needs to be saved and what does not need to be saved. The general retention schedule I find to be much more helpful because it's very specific, even by department, like admissions and finance and that kind of thing, what kinds of documents need to be saved and for how long. And when it's past that time that they need to be saved, they really are supposed to be destroyed. So this might be helpful in terms of making some of those kinds of decisions. The other thing, I sent a note to the university archivist just to let her know that we're going to be mentioning 8035 in the general retention schedule, and she asked that I remind everybody that University Archives does a web crawl on a regular basis of all of the content. So everything that we have out there is getting retained, and there's a dark archive of that information. So some of those things that get nixed can, if it's an absolute emergency, we can go back and recover them if absolutely necessary. But these are the guidelines, and they might help justify something as much as you can to get rid of some of those PDFs to remediate them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit of a discussion point in our college too, as to how long we keep stuff. I mean, when we moved to our current CMS, all of the old content was slung into there.
We did the same thing.
And boy, I wasn't there for that, but if I could have been would have tried to put a halt to that, because that would have been a good time to do some of this gardening that I think we needed to do. And some of the departmental sites when we migrated, that's exactly what we did. We basically stood up a new site and only moved the stuff that we thought was pertinent and relevant, and got rid of a lot of the old stuff, and that helped a lot. Boy, and when we scanned those sites, they did a lot better.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't much stuff. Elizabeth?
I have 2 questions, and I also have a comment about PDF, so.
Yes, please.
My PDF comment is, if you're stuck with old PDFs that for some reason you need to keep like a form or something like that, Adobe Acrobat Professional has pretty good utilities to export content to Word, in particular, sometimes HTML. That can get you out of jam. 2 questions. First, from Susan Hales. Does the archive crawling also include the campus website?
I believe it does, Susan, but that's a really good question, and I will get in touch with Jackie Esposito, who's the university archivist, and ask her and let you know. So either you'll hear from her or you'll hear from me, but we'll get an answer to that question. I believe it does.
And Susan would like Joe to share the report document.
I would do that. I need to update it, because I've updated it since then, but I want to, yes, I'll give you the updated version. Susan, you're talking about the one, the PDF that I just had there, the tagged PDF, is that right? Okay, yep. I'm sure I have your email address, Susan, so I can, I'll get that. To you. Other questions? No problem.
Yes.
We have a lot of publications on our website that we had created using InDesign, which has a ADA compliance, a PDF ADA compliance built into it when used properly. So those people in my unit who have these catalogs, I've been training them how to properly use all of the anchoring and tagging properly. And then there's a couple others that the content managers don't know how to do that, so that's kind of my summer project to kind of format them for them in InDesign, because they're publications that, maybe change once a year, but minimal changes. So like once I take the time to lay these all out, when I go back in to do the updates, from year to year.
Have you ever actually tested any of your documents?
We have one that Ken Gore, who's our head content manager, was going to send to Michelle. It's one of our catalogs that we have available.
Yes, I definitely recommend always testing, because there have been strange issues that come up. But if you are using InDesign, Linda.com just added a tutorial on creating accessible PDFs that might help people if they need to go that route.
Oh, I forgot to mention that.
Yeah.
Linda to the rescue.
So how far, are you only doing that for current documents, or how far back are you going?
Yeah, it's for current ones.
Okay.
I made it a kind of a New Year's resolution that anything that's posted as of this past January 1, that unless it's ADA compliant, it is not going on our website, period. And that includes all of our PDFs. So all of the PDFs that have been posted since January 1st have all been done in InDesign, have been ADA compliant. And I think there was a couple that I was in one of your last classes, and Michelle actually did look at a couple of them and kind of give us a thumbs up.
Oh, good, good. That's good to
There
hear.
was only one document. It was actually a Word document. It was a form, a locked form, and it wasn't necessarily. She never really said what the solution was, but it was reading the columns the way we had it formatted. Because basically we were trying to fit 5 pages worth of information in a 2-page document.
Right.
The document that's printed in, we're trying to be green and have it a double-sided document. That was the only kind of flag that she had. But I don't really know what the solution to that. She didn't really know what the solution to that answer was.
So, Joe, what do you recommend to people for if they have a web page that they want to have printed? Do you handle that all with style sheets, or do you sometimes have additional PDFs for
These are
print
I'm talking about forms, like forms that need to be filled out.
Okay, for fill and print.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fill and print forms that we did in using the Word form
And then the accessible.
and with the accessibility. But again, because it was so much information on one document, we used column or like a table to try to make sense of it all.
That was
And that's what,
confusing.
yeah, because it was reading like column 1, column 2, column 3, or
Right.
row 1, row 2, row 3.
Yeah, I don't have a really good solution for that at this point. I'll be the first to admit. So,
And Susan's giving us some more comments, so, PDFs have a lot of fancy layout which people want to keep. If the content is put into HTML, so if there's an alternative format, can you still have the PDF even if it isn't compliant?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I tell people also. If they're really fussy about the way it's printed and our style sheets, I mean, we have print style sheets, but it doesn't always look as nice as it would be, laid out PDF version.
As long as you have an accessible equivalent, you're fine.
So it's putting like on the bottom, like for a printer-friendly version of this document, like a link.
or for an accessible version.
Or if the accessible is on the website, but for a
Oh, I
printer-
see.
for a printer-friendly version of this
Yeah.
information.
Yeah,
Or you could
Get
just say PDF,
right.
because I'm not sure if a lot of people are going to realize what you're getting at with it by calling it a printer-friendly form.
Okay.
And then PDF, everybody pretty much knows that with PDFs, anything goes.
Carolyn also had a comment, I guess this is getting back to the Word file, which is sometimes you can use columns instead of tables. That is a good point, especially if you have text that comes in multiple columns. I think you probably knew that. I'd be curious, I'd have to look at the form myself. I know sometimes that works for forms and.
Michelle had actually, I don't know if you remember, but she had brought that document up while we were in that class and was reading through.
Yeah, I know that one. I do remember that one. I think, Carolyn did have a good comment there. I think my comment, tables are okay as long as they make sense, read left to right, top to bottom. But also I think it was sometimes lists can also be used in some cases, and I think the problem with that one document was if you could get rid of the boxes, or had a version which didn't have the boxes in them, because those boxes where you input form fields have to be properly tagged, and that could be, not many people know how to do that, so. I'm sure other people will have comments on this too.
Yep. So, document tables, so she's talking about, okay. Good questions. Yeah, this is the PDF. I don't know how this will come through, but let's see if it does. I'm not authorized? Okay. Please? This document?
Oh, I think you're on the wrong page. Trying to get to the.
I was going to go to the email and get that. Hold on.
Yeah.
Where are they? Sorry. Brain fade. Back up. I want the URL, that's all I want. This one. Oh no, I'm so bad. Sorry, folks. Go there! Copy. Yeah, I use computers sometimes.
PowerPoints and URLs are very clunky.
Yeah.
Is it coming? It's just giving me a not authorized.
Authorized.
All right, well, we'll spare you that. It was basically, another screen capture of Michelle, you trying to read a PDF that was not very well tagged.
Yeah. It was, I think it read the title and that was about it.
Yeah, it was a form, yeah.
Yeah, it was very disconcerting, yeah. We use that as an example for our content authors so they know, just gives them an example of how difficult PDFs can be.
Yeah, those demos are powerful. When people see someone using it and struggling with it, it's really helpful.
Yeah. So, In terms of sustaining accessibility, once you've gotten your content to a point where you're really in good shape and you are moving forward, one of the biggest challenges is how to maintain or sustain the level of accessibility that you've achieved. From a web manager standpoint, in terms of the templates and the components that you're working with, as ongoing development happens, what we just say is to test and test and test again. So we do testing using Wave, we do testing using Sheriff. Michelle comes and actually hangs out at the library with us for a few hours every month, and we test a lot of the stuff that is in development at the time to make sure that we're delivering templates to our authors that will be completely free of any accessibility errors. So all they need to worry about is what's inside, what's in the center. So we do that every step of development to ensure the accessibility is completely built in.
Nice.
And then for content managers, the way we try to sustain that level of accessibility is ongoing education. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of turnover in content managers and content authors often. So we have classes that go all the time, and I'm lucky in the fact that we've got a technology trainer in the libraries who does multiple classes and also does private training or, little brief tutorials. We have a lot of video tutorials and a lot of really good documentation that we point people to all the time, but that ongoing education is really important, and we do a lot of sessions in the library and multiple forums about accessibility so that awareness stays there. We don't want people to say, great, we achieved it, now we're done, we'll move on to the next thing. It's always has to be in front of them. And then we are trying really hard to do tracking and reporting. And Vicki Brightville, who is our accessibility person in our office, is focusing on this and doing a really nice job. So this is a lovely spreadsheet that you can't see it all, but that's all right. What this is, it just shows what we are capturing on a weekly basis. Each of those columns is let's see, wait, how is this one set up? Yeah, each of those columns shows a different area of the site, and then the rows are what our scores were that week, and what we hope to see is an improvement. We've laid off doing this. These were coming out of High Software, and we've laid off doing this because of some issues we were having with High Software, but we were tracking it every week so we could show progress, and part of that was for administration because we were getting a lot of financial support for our efforts in accessibility, and we needed to prove that we were actually using those resources well, and also for ourselves, so we could say this was working towards our October deadline of last year for the library, so we could kind of pat ourselves on the back and say, hey, we made it, we got there. And even though the health score isn't important and it's not about the numbers, people need something to hang on to and to see that things are getting incrementally better.
Speaking of health score, I have a question that I know has come up, which is, can you share sort of the type of information you sent to the NFB and what their reaction was to it? You just said it is done.
I think we did in our library's report, in the first year report, we did send.
The first report we had to send to NFB, and you did have some data in
there.
Yeah. And maybe we can talk about it offline a little bit, but I'm assuming it didn't say 100% done, it just was a report of progress.
It was a report, it was I think we talked about where we were at the beginning and how far we'd come, but it showed we didn't use the health score, we used the pass and fail score. So we had come to the conclusion that a score of less than 2% failure rate meant success. And so we were able to demonstrate that with our full site scan.
Do you ever see 100%
We have not. when we do these scans, we're looking at 5,000 pages. If we do a single page, we will see 100%. But 5,000 pages, there is no way we ever see 100%. And you know, there's always the visual checks too. And unless you do the whole spreadsheet thing where you capture your visual checks and then upload them every time you do a scan, which we kind of stopped doing. You're not going to see 100%.
So a 98.
98 is pretty good,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. It's an A, you know.
It's an
so.
A.
We really so I recommend to people that they actually focus on the most important pages that you have. And not try to report on, say, 5,000 pages, but maybe report on what you're keeping an eye on of maybe 100 pages. That these are the pages that they either represent templates that you use widely, or they contain a lot of tables that are heavily used. Are the pages being hit? That will tell you whether a page is important. If you have any kind of a registration form or an information gathering form, forms are typically a real problem, and so just focus on those things that represent the most important assets that you have, like Joe was explaining.
Yeah.
So we pick on 7 areas that we call blockers. The 4 that Joe is looking at most carefully are part of those blockers.
So I went a little crazy. I will admit I got a little particular about our accessibility, but we really went down to every single page. But that's a great point. And that was part of our plan, was looking at our analytics and what were really the most important pages or the most important page areas, which is how we broke them up. And then when we were looking at our assets, initially we looked at anything that had been hit more than twice in the last 6 months. So we have a lot of assets that had been hit once by the author who had uploaded them and we had to check them. And nobody else had accessed them at all.
What will the NFB be looking for? Like, what standards are they looking for? Are they and how are they going to look at all of our pages?
Well, when we put together the blockers, we actually took the feedback that we got from NFB. So we actually got several communications from the NFB. These are the problems: poor or missing alt text, unlabeled form fields, unstructured tables, that whole thing. And they helped us, repetition, you learn from repetition, right? So we got a number of communications from NFB that basically repeated. We just put so these are the things that they're really passionate about. And those blockers are on the homepage of accessibility.psu.edu.
But I mean, are they going to run our website through the Wave or Sheriff?
No, the National Federation of the Blind, I'm sure, would hire people who are using screen readers, because that's where the blockers are going to show up. Actually, Wave does a decent job of pointing out blockers also. But we really don't know what the NFB is going to do.
And maybe you don't know the answer to this, but what is an acceptable, level of errors? Is it that 98% or is it?
They did not specify. At the very least, what they're looking for is an improvement. They're looking for fewer problems compared to the when they first started this complaint against Penn State.
That makes it hard because there's no we have to get to this point. And that's what I struggled with a lot. And Christian and I have had a lot of conversations because you don't know. But
now, the counsel for NFB did say to me one time that We don't expect 100%. But I'm sure what they do expect is that the most important pages become accessible, particularly things like the admissions form, online admissions form. If that's not accessible, come on. I found an interesting one not too long ago. It was the online donation form. So if you're not accepting money from blind people, consider the stupidity of that sort of a policy.
Yeah, I think sort of in the same vein, we've been talking about triage, so an example would be anything that a lot of students hit. So Angel was specifically named because it's a system that almost all students are going to hit sooner or later.
That was part of the settlement.
And the libraries for the same reason. So for example, my own personal triage, I made sure to look at sites with the greatest number of hits, the ones that were open to the public. So, the one site that gets over 100,000 hits, I kind of took a look at, although it's not critical to Penn State. My 400 level course, I'm making sure the basics are done, but I know that some things aren't done, and I would just have to wait for an accommodation request.
And we do that in the libraries too. I mean, of course, our website is accessible, and we've worked with the vendor that provides our search to make sure that's accessible, but we can't control some of the databases and the e-resources that that our students have access to. And we also we have a lot of digitized collections, and we can't go back and re-digitize some of these things to make sure that they are all full text, or that they're OCR'd, and that they're all done properly, because there are millions and millions of documents. So, but what we do have, and I'll show this in a minute, is an easy way for people to get what they need if it's not already made accessible.
What about that third-party information that's on it? Do we demand that of our third parties? Say, I can't put this on my website, but it's not our information, it's coming from a third party.
I think it probably depends on what it is. I mean, for us, if we have a database that 95% of our students use all the time and it's not accessible, we can really use some very strong language and demand that they make it accessible. But the reality is that if we pulled it, it would be a huge disservice to a huge part of our population. So there's a fine line there. But one of the things that we've done in the libraries is do screen reader guides for some of our databases that are not as accessible, but they're very, very popular. And we're working with them to help them. Michelle's doing some testing with them, and we're reporting some of the problems for these platforms. So we have one of our digitization platforms. We're working with them pretty closely. Our search, the company that did our search, we're working with them. So, it's kind of a little bit of a back and forth and negotiation that has to happen. And I know Christian's done a lot of work in the RFP process. So as new stuff comes, as we purchase new stuff, that's something that we look at. But we have contracts with databases that we've had for years and years and years.
The only real leverage that we have is contracts are not perpetual. They are limited in time. So when the time for renewing a contract comes around, that's when you got your leverage. And that's when you start.
What if it's not contracted, though?
Then all you can do, and if it's not sourced from Penn State, all you can do is stand on the bully pulpit and try and reason with people that their content is putting Penn State at risk.
I had another question from Susan Hales about when do we start worrying about content provided by faculty and Angel, and I think I might start, and then if you have comments. So my comment is we understand that faculty are not going to meet the October deadline, and we're trying to, one of our goals, in addition to Beyond the Blockers, is rolling out more faculty training. We do have training for accessifying Word and PowerPoint, which will cover a lot of the issues. They are developing a session on Angel and accessibility, and then whatever our additional content management systems will be. I will say to faculty, I think there's still a lot of people in reactive mode. However, once a course becomes either hybrid or fully online, your risk will go up. So faculty who may have never gotten an accommodation request, once they go online, the risk is really going to go up because a lot of people with different issues like to take online courses. So there's my vague answer, and we're going to try and help provide a little more concreteness in the future. But I don't know if any.
For us, I can speak a little bit in the College of Science. So our content is hosted in a CMS outside of Angel, and our IT team has been focused on making sure that that is accessible, just as we're making these public-facing sites accessible. True, the faculty members, that's a hard sell and hard to get that, but there is, the instructional designer plays a key role there, the person who works with the faculty to make sure things are accessible, and so they're definitely paying attention to it. Obviously, some content is much more difficult than others, but
and with STEM stuff.
STEM
you
stuff
guys
is, it's gonna, So,
yeah.
Don't make that face.
Yeah.
Sorry.
My job.
All right. But so we just have a ways to go. That's so the reporting that we're seeing here, this slide we're seeing is showing the error. I think that's a failed. That's what the number you're trying to get under 2, right?
Yeah.
It's the failed.
Yep, the failed one, and then the visual checks that, of course, you have to go in and do manually.
Yeah.
So, but that was part of what we included with reporting to our content authors.
We've gotten most of those fails under 2% or to 0, but we're not scanning 5,000 pages, and we're not scanning PDFs.
We're not doing PDFs, scanning PDFs. Either.
Other people have said, well, it would actually be really easy to not allow people to upload files to the site. That would be really easy to do. Culturally, though, it might be a problem. So, we haven't wielded that big stick yet, but I can put them up there if you sent them to me, and we looked at, but we haven't gone there. I can't handle all that, the amount of load. It would just be a real problem. So, I digress.
So for people who have a lot of PDFs on their websites, Common Look provides tools, but they also have a service where they will scan your site. And I've heard that the service provides some pretty good data about what PDFs are or are not accessible. The tools, we've tried out the tools. The tools are good, but so are Acrobat version 11's tool. They also have a remediation service where if you have a large cache of PDFs and you just want to get them done, then you can send them to.
But large cache is the key word there, because I think they're really expensive too. I mean, I'm saying cash in the CA.
Well, you're paying somewhere
You'd be funny. Nice.
Depending on the complexity of the documents, you're paying between $5 and $15 a page, roughly.
Page. The most, for the record, the deadliest PDF you can have is one that's been generated from a scanner or a copier or a photograph.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it's just a giant image.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so we're getting close to the end of time.
Yeah.
So this is just this is where you would actually do the visual check, I assume.
Yes,
Is that right?
This is a tool that we've developed, and I won't spend much time on it. But this is something. It's an application that we've developed within our content management system. So every asset, we track every asset and then manually determine if it's accessible or not accessible. And once it's been checked, we know we don't have to check it again unless it's been edited, or we also flag the new one. So this gives us a good baseline, and then the reports, subsequent reports for our content managers are just the edited or the new assets that are in there. So it's a good way to keep track of it, way better than a spreadsheet. So.
Cool.
Who developed that?
One of the developers in our office, and it's really specific to Adobe CQ that we're using. The way their digital asset management system is set up, it's pretty powerful. So this is a form that we use so that people can actually report to us when they have problems with accessibility. So, all of the work that we're doing is great, but we're not going to catch everything. And especially in the library where we have resources that may or may not be accessible, or someone may need them in an alternative format. We have this form, it captures the URL of the page that it came from, and then it allows us to get back to people to provide something in an alternative format, or for them just to report that, hey, there's an accessibility issue with this page, and then whether they want to be contacted or not. And we respond to this within 24 hours. We have a bunch of people that are on this list to receive this form. But I have to say that really the only things that we've gotten back from this are, I'm having trouble accessing this book, or I'm having trouble accessing, yes. Yeah. So, which I think, is a good thing. People, hopefully that means that people are able to access all of the web pages and they don't need additional formats, but we still respond to those ones as well.
Cool.
So, but it's just a matter of making sure that our patrons, our users, can report if they have an issue and making it easy for them to report.
That's really similar. That's really cool. It's more complex, but it's similar in theory to something called Fix the Web. Have you heard about this?
Mm-hmm.
It's running out of the UK.
Yeah.
Beautiful idea. But this is better.
This is specific to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it allows people to do a bunch of different things, or just get help from disability services if they need it. So it's kind of multi-purpose. It's actually linked in 2 places on every single page.
Nice. So just a summary. I'm training content managers. There's a lot of information there, so it's somewhat overwhelming. But I've tried to distill it down to these 4 or 5 takeaway points, right? So in the end, they just need to remember, okay, these are the ways I can get in trouble: links, headings, tables, right? What was the other one? There's one I missed in there, but you get it. You get the idea. And I just reviewed it. These are the 5 things that you need to be aware of, and then I think it's less daunting if you look at it just in that light. So, and that's really what and making myself available to them has been my number one strategy. Some have taken me up on it, others, not so much, and I wish they would.
Yeah, sometimes it's a little hand-holding.
There's no doubt.
Yeah.
So there are email addresses. If she's still around, Susan, if you could drop me a note to remind me to send that'd be awesome. To send you that PDF, that'd be great. Okay, thank you. I don't want to forget on that, so that could happen. Other questions? Anything else anybody care to add here? We're at almost 1:30.
And I'm just going to look in the chat room, and I think we're good.
Okay, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
And have a good one. You're welcome.
Thanks. Bye.
Sorry,
I got to run to another meeting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for reminding me.
Well done.
Thank you. I was nearly the add-on. Joe was the king of the
It's good to get different
heavy-duty
perspectives.
content.
Different.
We had very.
They're doing it right. We're scattershot.
No. Thank you.
I got an Uzi.
No, what it was is that we got the edict from.
Richard can relate. I mean, he knows.
I feel your pain
Yeah, he's called this.
very, very closely.
Yep.